My name is Lauri Lukka. I'm an alumni from Aalto Games program, but also have a doctorate in science from Aalto University. And previous to that, I've been working as a clinical psychologist. And now talking about a project where we combine these two forms of art. So I'd like to maybe give a brief introduction on what's on agenda today. We're talking about an interdisciplinary project where our aim in Soihtu DTx is to make digital medicine that looks and feels like an entertainment video game. And we draw essentially from two key streams. We want to ensure that this game is interesting and meaningful to use. And here we use all of the lessons in game design and production. We have several people who have long-term industry background. And on the other hand, we have people who have background in clinical psychology, science, and other domains that relate to mental health. And we combine these two. And I always find it interesting to talk to different audiences. I talk with both people in the games industry, where I like to bring a bit of more emphasis on the mental health background that could be a bit newer here. And when I come and talk with the healthcare organizations, I like to emphasize what game design can bring for them. And here's our team. We have quite a diverse team from game design, technology, psychology, data, and science. Working actually here mostly in Otaniemi, in our grid where we have our headquarters. In addition, we have a bunch of experts that we work with internationally, as well as a great advisory team. But now the actual topic, talking about mental health, and maybe I'll introduce that. This is a topic that has been discussed quite a lot, and often when we discuss about mental health, we talk about the challenges and the problems associated with that. But there's also another side of the coin that is equally important, that is the positive mental health. That includes these different areas, our ability to connect with other people and the world around us, our ability to cope with different stresses in our lives that are inevitable, also to thrive and use our strengths, but also to apply our skills. And when we talk about mental health, we can see it in two ways. On the other hand, the aim is to strengthen this positive mental health, and on the other hand, alleviate the challenges that people may have. And in fact, the challenges in mental health, they're sometimes called mental disorders when they are rather moderate, at least moderately severe or rather severe. This means that there's a lot of people who live with mental disorders globally, almost 1 billion people. And most common mental health challenges are anxiety and depressive disorders. These are called mood disorders, and they are very, very common, which means that most of us in here or online either know a person who has had these challenges or may have had these challenges themselves at some point of their lives. So these mental health challenges have a huge influence on ourselves as well as our social relationships. And they are an important factor for our well-being and our ability to cope. Of course, they do also have an economic cost, which is estimated to be around $5 trillion annually. And what's more is that it appears that these mental disorders cause increasing disability. Now, this data come from the Finnish Kela, which tracks the long-term absences due to mental health disorders. And what we can see here is growth in both depressive absences as well as those absences that are due to anxiety, especially in the past 10 years. So it's a huge growth that has occurred in the last 10 years. And means that the demand for high quality evidence-based treatment grows. And if we look at some more statistics on how treatment is currently organized, we can see here data from the United States and from adults who have, for instance, depression and anxiety. And one can see that less than 1 in 5 receive therapy, even though they have these conditions. And we know that therapy can be beneficial for them. So, and on the other hand, we can see that there's a growth. That there's a growth in the number of people who receive therapy for these conditions, which means that there's maybe a growing understanding that these are conditions that we can treat and we can actually help people with. But there's still a large proportion of people who do not gain sufficient help to these conditions, which brings us to what are called treatment gaps in mental health. And there's actually not only one gap, but several gaps. Now focusing on depression, we know that, again, I'll draw here data from the United States. We can see that roughly 8% of the United States adults have had at least one depressive episode. And when you first notice these symptoms, it takes roughly 4 years for you to find treatment. It's quite a long period of time. And even when you seek treatment, it still takes weeks or months for you to find that help. And in fact, roughly 1 in 3 people live in an area where there's a shortage of therapists. So this means that it's even if you want help, you may not have access to that. Right. So let's say you tackle these hurdles, the long waiting times, the challenge of finding a therapist, going to the wait lists, then you go to a physician. We find that only a minority gain minimal adequate treatment. Roughly people. That's not too many. And even if you do receive treatment, then we see that only some 50% gain response from those treatments. So this is to say that there are effective treatments, but we don't yet know how to deliver those, how to scale those up. And what's currently in the current economies, this is also a domain where we don't see a lot of investment, also because the current treatments are not feasible to be scaled up to the degree that they perhaps should. And now solutions are being sought. There's actually very interesting research and development being done across mental health field. There's new AI solutions, there's the new psychedelic therapies, new biological treatments, neuromodulation treatments, and new digital treatments. So what we will see in the coming years is a huge change in how mental health is being treated as these new treatments come to the market and become more widely available. And one of the most promising lines of these new treatments are digital treatments. So their advantages being that they can be easily scalable to a large group of people. And we already see that there's a growing and already very strong evidence that these treatments are effective when and if they are used. But there's a significant challenge in digital treatments, and this is called low engagement. which means that the patients do not use these treatments sufficiently. There are many reasons for why this is. Are the treatments sufficiently attractive, sufficiently meaningful, sufficiently relevant, sufficiently supporting for the patients? These are challenges that digital treatments need to address to be sufficiently useful for the patient. And now you may see where this is going. Let me bridge to the other side of the coin, coming to the games. Good games help here. Of course, we know that video games, they are widely popular. Practically everyone plays. 2/3 of the population actively plays video games, and we know that video games are not only played by the youth, they are played by people of all ages and all genders. And what's important is that there's also a lot of evidence that there's positive effects from this gaming. And that's quite understandable. The things that we do, we often do them because they are enjoyable, they give us something, or we find them meaningful. And it's the same thing with games as well. Some of the benefits that games have is that they bring joy, they bring stimulation, they allow us to connect with other people, they allow us to spend time with those that we care about, they allow us to relax, which speaks to the media or particular advantages of using the digital media of games. This is from a report from subjective experiences from players. But there's also more objective data to show that there's also growth in these areas otherwise. Because of the advantages that games could bring to people, there's some people who suggest even that maybe we can use entertainment games because they are useful. Maybe we can use them in healthcare. But there are some challenges with this idea. In short, games are not medical devices. Healthcare has very high standard for what kind of devices can be used in terms of the data privacy, taking into account the risks related to the device use, integrating those with the healthcare systems, reimbursing those, so the business models are very different. So there's a lot of barriers for using entertainment games as such for these purposes. This is an example from an absolutely brilliant game that draws from mental disorders and gives them a form. Psychonauts 2. They actually consulted professionals in this field to ensure that their portrayals of mental health are correct. However, in their disclaimer, they say here that this is not a treatment, but this is a game for you to maybe understand these conditions more, or it talks about these problems, but it's not intended to be a treatment device. So these entertainment games cannot be directly used as treatment, but I think this is an important thing to note, is that when we have such common things such as mental disorders and digital games being very common, this means that a substantial population of people who play digital games also have mental health challenges. And this quote comes from our study where we looked at depression patients. And we found that many of them actually used entertainment games in a way that they even called therapeutic. So they use the games to feel better, to manage their emotions, to manage their symptoms, which is a positive thing in the sense that they found a way that can help them. But it's a negative thing in the sense that they are not using a device that is particularly targeted for alleviating those conditions. So that's why what we are creating at Soihtu DTx is the first personalized digital therapeutic for adult depression that is implemented as a video game. This is a project that has been ongoing for quite a period of time, because healthcare, the development cycles are very long when you create a new medicine. The project was started by Professor Matias Palva in University of Helsinki and Aalto University, where the first prototypes were made some 10 years ago. And roughly 5 years ago, the development of Meliora and its clinical trial was started. And we have recently completed this trial a bit over a year ago, and now we are developing the commercial version of this treatment that is intended for adults with major depressive disorder. And now to talk a bit about our approach and where games can really help. So what's the unique thing that games can deliver? We all know that games are essentially, they are puzzles, they are challenges, they are problems, something for the person to solve. And now, this is particularly important when we looked at the depression as a condition. Many adults currently experience mood symptoms. These are typically associated with depression. This means that people feel low, they don't have energy to do the things that they usually found meaningful. These are the most common things that people associate with depression. And actually, the existing treatments target these. The antidepressants as a biological treatment and psychological interventions targeting the thought and behavioral patterns associated with these. But there's also another category of symptoms, the neurocognitive impairments, which refer to lowered ability to sustain one's attention, to keep things in mind, and these are highly disabling. When you can't keep things in mind, can't plan efficiently, can't stick to the plan, these have a really substantial influence in how patients can't cope with their everyday lives. And there's no current treatment that would target specifically this area. So that's why we see that digital games are particularly suited in targeting these neurocognitive impairments and producing a training regimen that can alleviate these in an engaging and interesting format. And this is a new mechanism of action, a new active ingredient, you could say, in these games. And our previous trial that was conducted, which I mentioned earlier, particularly was targeted to understand if this approach is effective in alleviating depression. And this is what it looks like. So what we have here is essentially a first-person game that integrates some real-time strategy elements to make to really challenge the person's attention and their other cognitive abilities. And the story here being that you are fighting for the light and against the darkness. Right. But now the interesting question, this was our approach, and now question is, of course, is this approach effective in helping people who have these challenges? And we actually conducted the largest in class clinical trial that has been globally ever conducted with adult depression patients who have rather severe depression symptoms. And what we see here is that this treatment was actually appealing to people of different ages, from young adults to middle-aged adults. And we saw that actually majority of our users were female, which is not surprising considering that depression is more common in females than in males. But this is actually something that quite often surprises people when we talk about that we have a game-based approach. But it appears that this approach is appealing broadly across genders and ages. But now the question, is this effective? We randomized our patients to 3 different groups. The first group continued in the treatment as usual. So they continued their pharmacological treatment or their psychotherapy as usual. A second group was given a sham device, which was essentially a diminished version of our active treatment with less cognitive training than our active treatment device. And then we have the third group that had the full cognitive training in the video game mode, which is here on the blue. And what we see here is that the patients who continued in the treatment as usual alone gained some 1 point of reduction from their treatment. But when you add our treatment, they receive roughly a 3-point reduction in the depressive symptoms. So it's a 3-fold increase compared to what they would have otherwise received. And this is a treatment that can be feasibly scaled to the population. But the depression symptoms are not the only thing that we can help with. Actually, we measured quite a few different things. And what we saw are broad positive effects. We saw reductions in anxiety, improvements in well-being. This is more of the positive mental health. We see reductions in disability, improvements in the cognitive functions that we aim to train. So the effects are not only targeted to one particular area, but they radiate more broadly to other areas of our functioning as well. So, how about are there any downsides? And one thing that I'm often asked is there a challenge of using an addictive media to treat depression? So, can this cause a challenge? And this is actually an area where we now have an answer to from our trial. We measured whether patients increased in their gaming addiction symptoms throughout this trial. And what we see here is rather a reduction in the gaming addiction scores. So this means that the treatment is immersive. So you focus on it, but it's not addictive. And this is actually the first study, to the best of our knowledge, to show this. And we have very positive results from this essentially best-in-class clinical trial. And what we are working on now is we are building on that evidence to create the commercial version, Meliora, next. We are changing the narrative a bit, and we welcome here you to Solana 2, an abandoned resort planet where you take control of a small robot character to explore this unique environment and find what hidden treasures it contains. And there you meet different characters. First we have Amy, a holographic therapist character who is supporting the patient throughout this journey. And then we have Mappy, a quirky robot character who supports our main character throughout this journey and acts as a bit of a comic sidekick as well. But while we look and feel like an entertainment game, we have a dual action treatment approach. So our treatment targets these neurocognitive symptoms with our executive functions training regimen, which we validated in the trial. And secondly, we target the depression-related thought and problematic thought and behavioral patterns with the best-in-class cognitive behavioral therapy that is a proven and accepted form of treatment for adult depression. And our treatment combines these two in a very unique way that hasn't been seen elsewhere. First of all, we have the executive functions training, which we deliver as tasks and problems and puzzles to the patient. And moreover, these tasks are not just randomized, they are personalized in their difficulty. So what we do is we measure the patient's performance in these key cognitive structures, and then we match the player with just the right tasks and their difficulty, which means that the tasks are easy to learn, difficult to master, as best games are. And this is a unique approach that is not available in other treatments. So we have the puzzles. What more? We have a different approach from cognitive behavioral therapy that targets the depression-related thoughts and behaviors. And we deliver this with the Amy characters, who is supporting and who has a branching, adaptive, relevant narrative for these patients specifically that is developed in collaboration with leading psychologists and psychotherapists. But this does not use AI, ensuring that we have full control over the narrative and the delivered content. The CBT is already validated and accepted form of treatment, but it's not currently being scaled to all patients. And what we allow is delivering this evidence-based care to a large group of people. And now, how we bring this all together. We have built an immersive game that paces these distinct elements for the patient. They start with a story element, interacting with the game world, then encountering the EFT task that really challenges them and pushes them to work on these, for instance, their working memory. Then they encounter the Amy therapist working with the CBT content to change what they do also outside the game, then EFT, and so on and so forth. So we have a world for the patient to explore, and these different mechanisms of actions are embedded in that game world. And now, what does it look like? It should be shown. Let's go back. You can imagine it. I can see it.
Stick with finding the self-repair routines.
In that case, it looks brilliant. Take my word for it. So we have a mobile game implementation of these different elements, and we have a brilliant team to build it. And the aim is to bridge these treatment gaps that I mentioned earlier. So we have a depression patient population, and what we want to do is to address the challenges there. Many existing people may not find that they maybe don't want to interact with one-on-one therapeutic context, or they may not find that they don't want the pharmacological treatments due to their side effects, which we know that are really substantial. So there's not many alternatives that you could do from home with little side effects. So that's why we want to make treatment appealing and interesting and really cater to a broad audience. And of course, when you seek treatment, where we see a lot of drop-off and where we really could make an impact is that when a patient seeks help, that's the right time to provide them help. But what many people find is a long waiting time. Of course, our solution can be provided very rapidly to the patients at scale, regardless of where they are. We want to also extend the evidence-based care through the CBT as well as our proprietary executive functions training and really provide high quality care to more people. And with these, we will achieve real health and economic benefits and reduce the cost and suffering that depression causes. And that is what we are building right now over here and with our team across the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lauri. That's very impressive. Look what we have gone here now with games, like already in this kind of, there's a lot of complications, a lot of new things, a lot of like maturing in the game industry, and now we get treatment also like this.
Indeed, this is working at the frontier.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, just feel free to raise your hand and mic will be brought to you. I'm gonna start with sort of like game development question that you have a degree in games and you've been working in game companies. So how does this kind of production differs from the kind of so-called traditional or entertainment game productions? Right.
There's quite a few differences. Starting off with our evidence base. So what we create must be rooted in science. So our two mechanisms of action, the CBT and the are regulated medical device, and we have a high have to focus a lot of attention, time and energy on our quality management system to show that these two features are delivered in a safe and effective way to the patients and provide the evidence of what production process led to creating them. So this is a major thing that we have to focus a lot of energy and time on. But then there are areas that are outside of these two medical device contexts where we have a bit more creative freedom of how things, for instance, how they look and how they feel, and focusing on delivering a really high quality user or patient or game experience. And there we can draw from the game development processes. But then negotiating the interaction between these two to ensure that what we create is rooted in science, evidence, and healthcare practices, and combining that with an engaging way to deliver it, that's something that we work a lot on.
Yeah, it's a hard work to do applied games all together.
Yes.
How in the team are people that have science background and games background? How is the communication? Does it need a lot of this kind of spaces to translate between the disciplines?
It does. And our founder team has been working on this for 4 years, and there's definitely this interdisciplinary interaction is something that is very challenging because people come from different backgrounds. They are used to different things, that what works there. And what we want to do is combine the best of the two worlds, and that requires a lot of communication, a lot of negotiation. Some things are not always possible, and then off your ideas. That's tough, and then kind of finding the balance of what are the essential things that we really need to focus on.
So picking your battles, so to speak.
Yeah, you could say it in that way. Yes.
Okay, any questions from the audience? There's one coming up here, so let's get the mic to that.
Hi, just had this one question. So the game has story in between the EFT and CBT moments, right? So I wonder what kind of therapeutic practices influence the creation of the story, or the question is, how is storytelling used as a therapeutic tool as well in games? Or how did the narrative design go in that direction? How did you design the narrative?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Because I think the whole idea of CBT is that words can have a tremendous impact on us, and what we want to do is have these different elements aligned. So I'm working a lot with this CBT and the narrative elements, and how we think about it is that we have distinct CBT elements, but which are delivered through words and character interactions. But then we have a category of narrative elements, which are not the regulated medical device, but rather guide and support the patient through the journey. So we want to tie these two together with having, for instance, the same characters with the same tone of voice in the same environment. And we have spent quite a bit of time on building the world, the different characters, their backgrounds, and ensuring that this is something that is suitable for our audience. So that's another thing to consider of who our patients will be and what they might find meaningful. So for instance, this means that even though we have some sci-fi elements, we have toned that quite a lot of down to ensure that this is not technobabble, or that it doesn't feel something that is really complicated to understand. But we want to make it something that anyone can understand from a very, for instance, spending a lot of time on the concepts that we use, because we know that our patients will come from a variety of backgrounds, including those who have high education, but also a lot of people who don't have higher education. So how can we ensure that the way we communicate to the player doesn't use concepts or words or structures or level of ability that is relevant to both audiences, something that can give insights to those with higher education, and those who may have lower education can find it understandable and approachable to them.
How much space there is to sort of like have a different kind of narrative world with the same structure, same kind of wording, so that they could cater for different taste of, like we don't like the same kind of things,
right,
that kind of way.
Right.
How much space there is to sort of skin the experience to another?
There is. What we have wanted to do here is not to have like a skinned experience, but really tie all of the elements really tightly together to create like a uniform treatment. So that said, I think there is a lot of opportunity to cater to different audiences. For instance, the anxiety disorders that could be really approachable with our approach. To different cultures, making adaptations that suit, for instance, a particular culture, or we could deliver the game in a different game genre. That could also be possible, but of course that work is, when you want to do it on a high level, it's not only about skinning, but building all of the game elements and ensuring they fit together. So it's quite a bit of work.
Yeah, so if you have this game and then you want to make another one in 10 years, it's still like a lot of manual work to make it.
It is. It is. It's quite a lot of work, but we can build on our science. We can build on our mechanisms of action. We can maybe the characters could be used in another setting. Maybe they travel somewhere. So there's a lot of opportunities that can be imagined.
Yeah, for the future. Would you then need to do clinical trial again, or is it about the structure and kind of the mode of the things, or is it also like do you have to do it again if you change something in the game?
Right. So a clinical trial is required for regulatory approval for prescription digital therapeutics, which means that this is the highest level of medical devices that are regulated, for instance, here in Finland by FIMEA, or in the United States by FDA, Food and Drug Administration. And they state that if there's a substantial change due to technology, you need to create more evidence that the changes do not affect the safety or the efficacy of the product. And now, this is also like we are used to games being constantly updated, constantly changed, like improved. And how to negotiate this? What's a substantial change?
Yeah.
What's something adding a feature that is more about maybe improving the engagement, improving the game experience? What's a substantial change that could affect those areas? This is a domain that I would say where we really need to also pioneer in this, because there are not always answers to these questions, and we actually have a person dedicated only to regulatory affairs. So we do follow this field very closely.
Yeah, and it's hard when it's different in different countries, of course.
Precisely.
There was another question coming in there, or did we already answer? So we take another one. Okay. Oh, there is another one here. Okay, all right, good.
Hello. Wow, this was so fascinating. I would want to ask a question regarding, with these methods, of course, the patients need to go through regular psychotherapy, maybe have some medication. So my question would be, how are these different methods combined together so that the patients would get better and healthier?
Right. So our patient population was actively engaging in some sort of existing treatment here in Finland, meaning typically pharmacological treatments, that is typically SSRI medicine or talking therapies, either in more narrow form or psychotherapy, or the combination of these two. And now the question is, can we identify populations of depression patients or treatment combinations that would be particularly suited, where we would have synergies? And I think this is a really fascinating question, and we have done some work already on this topic. We have evaluated who find our patient this approach meaningful. We have also segmented our patients, and we should have a scientific paper coming up on this that examines the factors that explain the efficacy. And we want to do and will do more research on this question, because this is a fundamental question of who can you recommend this to. So my answer is, we have some data, we need some more data, and we are working towards that direction.
There's more questions here. I think that's the final one.
Hello, thank you for the great presentation. My question would be, because this is a very, very research-based and serious topic, but and you have a lot of people working on it. I would ask how, because I do believe that there would be also indies who would be interested in these topics and implement or create games that use these themes for them. Are there any guidelines or tips that you could provide for those indies, how they could get started, how could they get professionals involved if they want to be very serious to have these sort of themes, or in a way create a game that could help people, for example, in having these problems?
Right. I think there's kind of two things that I would like to a bit differentiate. First is like you say, representation. Whenever games or television or movies, any type of media portray a certain minority, whether it's a cultural minority or whether it's a minority with certain disability or a disorder, it's important to be empathetic and really understand that condition, as opposed to saying that these things are bad and not wanted, something that we should shy away from, because that's really harmful. Well, what I think is super important and a great opportunity for games to create more empathy and more understanding towards the conditions. And I would encourage people to consult with professionals in whatever field they are working on. Talk with patients, talk with psychologists, talk with psychiatrists to ensure that what you are building really represents the topic that you are trying to portray. And then the question is using games as treatment. And there I would say there are more of barriers and a really higher threshold. And that's a really more complex topic, for instance, that then you require evidence, clinical trials, regulatory pathways, reimbursement pathways. And that's quite a bit more difficult to build, and that requires changing the whole business logic with the game. So that's maybe a more complex thing to do.
I think that in Europe, at least, we have quite regulatory space for health claims. So if you want to sell something with a health claim, you really have to have that science backing that up. But isn't it a bit different in other countries like US, or like how much is the difference for the regulatory space for that?
Right. That's a great question. And in mental health, we see a differentiation between well-being applications and then digital therapeutics. Well-being applications are something that are targeted directly to the consumers. They may teach you some skills to cope, and they often draw, for instance, from mindfulness or some CBT elements there. But they are not medical devices, but they use a bit similar approaches. But they are not regulated devices, and they don't make any health claims.
Yeah.
So this creates a bit of a gray zone for these applications. Like where does you imply a positive health gain, but you don't say it? Where's the border in that?
Yeah.
And that's something that will be more regulated in the coming years.
Yeah.
And now, for instance, in the United States, there is a growing attention to these applications because there's a demand, there's a need for these, and the FDA is clarifying their position on these. And the same thing is happening also in the EU. For instance, there's now country-based regulatory approaches, but no EU-wide. But I think that will be coming in some years.
It's good to end here. We have the next talk coming up, but thank you for the questions.